hellhounds, black shucks, Barghest or Grim. These are the figures which spring to mind when we think of fairy dogs. Evil, huge, terrifying and violent, and in some instances, even deadly dogs. Black in colour with shining eyes of red and long razor-sharp teeth, they stalk the night, hunting for people in some seemingly random search for vengeance. Lesser known or discussed are the other kind of fairy dogs, guardian dogs. Just as some fairy folk are terrifying and dangerous, others are kindly and thoughtful towards humans, and so it is with fairy dogs. There are many people, including myself, who have experienced the strangeness of being guided and guarded by one of these incredible fairy dogs. If you missed my personal encounter with a guardian dog, just check out last week's video. So for me, and for obvious reasons, fairy guardian dogs represent the best of fairies. Their care and protective nature toward vulnerable humans. Do they know something that we don't know? Do they see the danger lurking in the shadows that's just outside of our view? Or can they see a terrible event which is about to unfold and they strive to change our fate? Well, I hope you enjoy these true accounts from people whose lives have been ever changed by the intervention of a fairy guardian dog, and check out how differently people reacted to the presence of a fairy dog. In November 1937, author Ethel Rudkin received a letter written by a Mrs. Cook of Boston. In the letter, Mrs. Cook described her father's bizarre experience one Sunday evening in winter while walking from the town of Hogsthorpe to Willoughby. He was a lay preacher attached to the Methodist Church and a man of astounding physical strength and courage. Yet, on this night, as he approached Mumby Long Lane, he was assaulted by an uncanny feeling of something being wrong. But despite this, he entered the lane. Almost immediately upon entering the lane, the preacher found himself walking next to a large black dog that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The preacher was somewhat nervous about dogs and would have rather faced a man at night than a canine, so he tried to shoo away the strange animal, but to no avail. It steadfastly walked with him until he reached the end of the lane, where the dog vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Apparently, the uncanny feeling must have vanished along with the black dog, for the preacher always maintained from then on that his unexpected escort that night had been providentially sent to protect him from some unknown danger. A schoolmistress from the town of Manton in England often saw a black dog when she rode her bicycle back home to Manton after attending a lecture or making a visit to Curtin. The schoolmistress described how, as she was riding along, she would become aware of the large black dog trotting on the grass beside her, and just as vaguely she would eventually notice that he was gone, never directly seeing the black dog arrive or leave. She made inquiries among the school children and their families, but found that no one in the town owned any such large black dog. She reported that she was aware that the presence of a black dog was a portent of bad news, but that she always felt comforted by the black dog trotting with her as she rode alone between the towns. Mrs. Brown reported that in her younger days she used to meet a young man, who later became her husband, every evening. They would walk together to the Blyborough fish pond, then, after spending time together, would head off in different directions to their respective homes. Mrs. Brown would take the road along the pond to head to the village of Greyingham alone. One night, she became aware that a large black dog was following behind her. She felt irritated by the dog just following along where she couldn't see it, so she slowed down to allow the creature to catch up with her. As the strange animal came side to side with Mrs. Brown and trotted along contentedly, she quickly lifted her umbrella and struck at the black dog as hard as she could. The blow passed clean through the animal's body without even disturbing it. The black dog continued to walk beside her until they came to the ash tree at the end of Chapel's Lane, where the beast vanished, either up the tree or into it. Mrs. Brown was most shaken by the experience. A mile west of Curtin is a farm known as Bell Hole. At and near this farm, a phantom black dog is frequently seen, most often along the stretch of road leading to the town of Curtin. The black dog was believed to occupy a hole that is on the bank of a nearby stream, and the custom at the time was to keep the hole covered with sticks. If the black dog was seen, the hole would invariably be found open the following morning, then quickly covered up again by local folk. The black dog usually appeared along the road to Curtin at night, walking or sometimes running just out of arm's reach beside a single person. It could never be touched. But one day, a most extraordinary event occurred, and the farmer's wife at Bell Hole Farm got a very close look at this phantom black dog. It was evening, and the woman was alone in the cottage when, with no sound or warning, the black dog walked through the open door into her kitchen. It then proceeded to carefully walk around the kitchen before venturing further into the cottage. The woman stood still as a statue, knowing that this was no ordinary dog and did not dare to disturb it. It was clear this black dog wanted to explore her cottage, and she intended to let it. She never knew its reasoning or intent, but after several minutes, the dog returned to the kitchen and wandered back out the kitchen door. At no time did it approach or even acknowledge Mrs. Brown. The house I was living in was set back from the road. We lived in a little lake community, so I had neighbours, but mostly elderly and retirees, so it's usually quiet after about 9 p.m. There's only one street light in our cluster of houses, and it happened to be in my yard, but it wasn't particularly bright or even useful. This one night, I got home around midnight and got out of my car and immediately went to cross the street to check the mail before going in the house. It's not a far walk, but it takes a couple of minutes in all. So I get onto the road, and about halfway across, I get the most intense feeling of being watched. I'm pretty sensitive, but not particularly paranoid, so it struck me with just how overwhelming it felt. As soon as I felt it, I turned to my right, and there, in the middle of the road, a few yards away from and just out of the reach of the light is a shadowy shape of a dog. Now, I knew every single dog in that neighbourhood, and outside of that community, neighbours are few and far between. Instinctively, I knew that I didn't know this dog, so I panicked briefly because no one wants to get attacked by a strange dog, and I knew I would lose the chase back to my house if I tried. But the longer I stood there thinking, the weirder it got. The shadowy dog was unnaturally still. I mean, it didn't move at all while I looked at it, not even an ear twitch. And even though it was dark out, it wasn't too dark out. I knew I should have been able to make out at least a few details of it, and I couldn't. It was almost just a dark shape of a dog, but I knew that it was looking right at me. I decided that since I was practically at my mailbox, that I'd continue on, grab my mail, and calmly walk back to the house, while keeping my eye on the dog just in case. And that's where it got even more unusual. As I moved, its head turned to follow me, but nothing else. Other than the obvious head movement, its body was still unnaturally still, and the light never caught its eyes either. It turned its head to follow me to the mailbox and followed me with its head all the way to my porch and into the house. As soon as I shut the screen door, I locked the latch on it and I turned to look out at the dog. It looked in my direction for just a moment and then turned around and walked back the other direction into the darkness. I had the strong feeling that I needed to go around and lock all of my doors that night, so I did. I normally left the back door unlocked at night because you'd have to do a lot of work to get over our back fence, plus we had a dog of our own. After being inside for a bit, I had a feeling that that shadow dog I saw wasn't really a threat to me, or even an actual dog, but maybe it was some kind of guard. The frustrating thing in these reports, and in my own experience too, is that we will never know what the fairy guardian dogs were protecting us from, what it was that they thwarted, or what they were guarding against. The one constant, though, is that although each person responds differently, they all report that they felt no fear of the dog. Bewilderment, mild annoyance, particularly the lady who tried to hit it with an umbrella, and curiosity, yes, but not fear. I wonder how many people are protected by a fairy guardian dog these days and they don't even notice. So distracted by their phone, they don't notice the quiet guardian who appears silently, padding along beside them, just out of reach, and is gone again in the blink of an eye. I hope you've enjoyed this strange collection. I've had a lot of fun putting it together for you. Before you go, please be sure to hit that like button. It doesn't cost a thing and it really helps me. In the vast universe that is YouTube, that little click helps Fairy Encounters to shine a little brighter. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!